I don't know if you guys can hear that sound out in the distance or not. That's one of my neighbors mowing grass. It is Easter Sunday, and I would say at least 10 of my neighbors have already mowed. So you guys know what that means. It means we got to get on Mr. Neglected over here that we had 6 months to work on and never touched. Let's get started. If you're just joining us now, this is, as near as I can tell, my 1974 Cub Cadet 149. This is my 50-year-old lawnmower. Pretty much every spring we have to go through kind of a rigmarole with this thing to get maintenance items addressed, and that mostly are because I've deferred them and things of that nature. Last year where we left off is we had a heinous transmission leak that I attempted to fix and failed because it is somewhere other than where I thought it was. And then we've got a new problem where the deck is mowing like really off level and it's just riding way too low. And this thing does have a hydraulic deck lift, so you should be able to just pick the deck up wherever you want and it'll just stay there, but I know I have an internal hydraulic leak, so the thing just always drops to the bottom. These are separate issues, and we're going to explore that to see if I need to actually order any parts or to see if it just have a broken shear pin or something like that that just needs replaced. And I looked at that last year and I didn't see anything wrong. This year, if I still don't see anything wrong, I'm actually going to drive all the old shear pins out and see if one's broken and just keep diving and diving until we find something that is wrong. And if you are just joining us, welcome to the channel. And there'll be a flag right up there for a playlist for this tractor. So the first step of our investigation here is to get the mule drive and deck hanger assembly off of the thing, which is right there. You can see the deck itself is already off. We removed it for winter storage. And to do that on this tractor, there's a handle right here that you just have to pull down to release the tension off of this, and the belt's still on it, but it's not really on it. In mine, this handle's been bent like this since time began, and it's had this spring on it the whole time I've ever known it to. And I don't know if that's an original spring or not, but the idea is you take that handle, move it down, and we should be able to, I think, just pull this guy off. And there she comes. And the belt is, I've got the belt zip tied onto it because I had it running and I didn't want to chew the belt up, so I need to cut some zip ties, but that's really all there should be to it. It just slides onto a fork in the back. That fork, it's already slid off of that support. And then I'd forgotten that there are also these cotter pins on both sides that we need to pull. I'm going to go ahead and try and pull them from this location because these are the arms we need to look at. And in fact, I already see that the arms are way off square. It's kind of hard to show you on camera, so you have to take my word for it, but that is pretty much how they look to me in reality. You see the arm on the far side is down about an extra ½ inch or so from where it's supposed to be. I'm betting we got a broken shear pin over there, which reminds me of something else, but let's get these cotter pins out and then we'll talk about that. So we got that guy off. Decided to go ahead and leave the hangers on the tractor side for now, just because the other arms were the easier ones to get off. And I'd forgotten we also need to reinstall our belt tensioning, releasing handle on this guy. So the hardware fell off of it last year. It just goes on like that. So we just got to replace this nut and bolt assembly and all that good stuff. But that is not what I wanted to talk about right now. What I'd like to talk about right now is a comment I received a few months back on one of the videos I made on this thing last year, whereas I was working on this same issue, or maybe the drive shaft, I can't remember which video anymore. I was referring to these shear pins as roll pins. And I had a gentleman comment to me and tell me, Cub Cadets don't use shear pins anywhere, they only use spiral pins. And I had to reply to that guy, well, we're both kind of wrong here. This is a spiral pin and this is a shear pin. So you have a hierarchy of events, right? You have shear pins being one big category, and then there are many different types. Cub Cadets do use spiral pins, and you can see that that's just a piece of like flat sheet metal that's been rolled up in a spiral. These are typically much stronger than what most people would refer to as a shear pin. And I believe I was also calling them roll pins, which is a different thing entirely, and he was right to correct me about that. A roll pin will basically look more or less like this. It'll just be a pin, and you have a slot in the top of it. But when you look down it, normally they're not, excuse my fancy artwork, they're not a spiral like this. It's just basically a solid dowel pin that's hollow in the center and then has a slit down the top of it. And they do that to reduce the strength of a dowel pin so it will break off sacrificially instead of break something else. That's why equipment like this uses shear pins all over the place. Speaking of, there are many other kinds of shear pins in the world. This is one of the factory shear pins for my Simplicity snow thrower. For the auger drive, the augers are shear pinned in, so if you pick up a newspaper, a big rock or something, and the auger comes down and hits it and it jams up in the chute, it doesn't just break something, it just shears these pins off. And you can see, other than where the clip that holds it in goes, these are completely solid. These look just like a dowel. They've engineered my snow thrower to use whatever size solid diameter material this is to be the sacrificial link that breaks, instead of using a spiral pin or a split pin or whatever. And you'll also sometimes see shear pins that just have a bunch of holes drilled in them to achieve the same point. The important thing here is if your equipment uses a shear pin, no matter what type it uses, make sure you put a shear pin back in it. Don't just put a bolt in there, because you'll start breaking stuff if you do that. So I wanted to address that comment. That gentleman was right to correct me. And it's a topic that should have been cleared up a little bit, and I hope I did that for you. And the next thing we need to hope is that this is actually the proper size spiral pin for what I think we need. I hope so, because it's the only ones I have. Otherwise I got to order some. And actually back here at the drive shaft coupler, that is a roll pin in that guy. I'm not sure if that's what it's supposed to be. I'll look it up and verify and leave a note down there for you. But anyway, you can see that that's just a split roll pin like what I was trying to draw. So the next thing I need to do is pull that transmission cover off. There are just 4 bolts to hold it on to per side, so I can get a little better access to try and drive the old pins out of all this stuff, because the rock shaft runs right through that area of the frame. So we'll just get that guy out of our way. So we've got that cover off, and right there is the rock shaft that both of those lift arms pin into. And if we're lucky, it'll be this arm that has the broken pin, and this is the side that was dragging. And you can see right there is the hole the pin lives in, and these things are not much fun at all to drive out of there. I think maybe I have access to do that from the bottom. If I get this just in the right location, I think there's like a little slot in the frame. If not, I've got to drive the pin out of this arm and the pin out of the stop there to be able to slide the whole rock shaft over to be able to get access to that. These are not much fun. I just decided I'm going to take the whole rock shaft out, just because I don't see an obvious problem with anything that's wrong. But you see that left hand arm over there? It comes up and hits the frame right there. You see that right hand arm is like half an inch away from the frame. So something there isn't right. So I'm just going to drive all the pins out of it and see what's happening. Well, I found our problem. What you're looking at right there is the right hand side shear pin, and it's actually dropped under the height of the lift arm. And I've got a screwdriver that's small, and will actually go through the hole in the middle of the shear pin. And you can see it won't go all the way through because it's probably broke off down in that hole. So this is the side that has the problem for sure. I've got the 2 other pins out, but since this one's broken, it's going to be a lot of fun. I'll probably have to do that one from the top somehow, like get a jack under there to hold the arm while I smack it down. We'll just have to see. In other news, to be able to get this piece off the side, this guy here, which is your hydraulic height stop, that piece goes onto that shaft. That shaft sticks out here. You just have to take the footrest off, which is just these 4 screws, and it pops off. If your Cub Cadet is original, these will be, I think, 4 flat blade screws, and God help you if they've never been out before. You're gonna have a good time. About 20 years ago, mine got replaced with stainless steel bolts. These guys. So they're always really nice to take out. Highly recommend, if you have to ever take your fenders off, just put stainless bolts in and be done with it. Kind of a similar topic. This is one of the old pins that I drove out of it. I put these pins in it probably 6 or 7 years ago. These are also stainless pins. That's one of the reasons I wasn't wishing for death as I was getting these things out. Actually weren't too bad to get out other than the access to the tractor. But I also anti-seized the crap out of these before I put them in. And you can see there's not a speck of anti-seize left on them, but they also didn't get rusty because they're stainless. Also, it helps if you have proper pin punches. This is a pin punch. And the whole idea here is that little ball end of it goes down in to shear pins, so your punch doesn't try and run away. You can also get these for air chisels. I've just never really found a need for them. This is the full set I have. I think these were like 30 bucks or so on Amazon some years ago. I'll throw a link in the description for you if you're interested. 7/32 is the size I've been using here. Well, I actually ended up getting really lucky. They managed to drive the pin out from the top without much trouble. And you can see this didn't actually shear, it just bent. And it's possible that maybe it like started walking down the hole and then took a turn and off it went. Who knows? And I actually did not end up using one of these pin punches to get it out. Since it was already offset in the hole, that wouldn't have done me any good. So I just used one of my gigantic, ultra long reach regular punches here. It's probably about a 10-inch long punch. I'll get it dug back out of there and show it to you if you are thinking you'd like to have one of those. Highly recommend you do. There you go. Good old school Craftsman lineup punch. You know, yeah, right. But this one happens to be a Craftsman 42902. I'll look that up and see if I can find you a comparable, because this is one of my most important tools in the shop. I've used this bunch of time, as you can see. And now I do have kind of a different problem. I could just put the pins back in this the way it is, and it'll go back together just like it was. However, I think that this rock shaft is screwed up. I think the pinholes in it have been welded and relocated over the years, because I've got a feeling the left and right side should both be, you know, perpendicular to each other, and they're not. I found that out the hard way. So it's possible to, actually what it is this hole on the outside versus those holes on the inside. They're not 90 degrees to each other. One of them is out several degrees. So it's actually possible to put this thing back together wrong and not know you did. And I actually bought another used rock shaft, and I've had it on hand for years just in case I ever had to tear this thing apart again. And I'm tempted to go grab it and see how it compares to this one. I think that's what we're probably going to do. And I'm glad I decided to do that, because you can see this other rock shaft has the same condition where these holes aren't perpendicular to each other. So that must be by design. In my opinion, it's not a very good design, but looks like my rock shaft that's in it is probably fine all the same. However, that ends up not being the end of our troubles. I started to put the pins back in it, and put the pin back in this arm, and I actually think I used the pin that was originally over here. And then I started trying to put the pin back in the other side and ran into all kinds of trouble. Now we're under the tractor, and you can see where the little excess notch in the frame is to be able to pound these pins in. And that pin, I wailed on and wailed on for probably about an hour trying to get it in. And that is one of the replacement pins I showed you earlier, brand new. It's a little hard to show you what's going on, but that is all the further I could get it in. And I actually did put the air chisel on that, and I just started driving the inside coils of the pin apart. So I started making it into a cone instead of a pin, and I stopped. So now I'm going to have to try and get that thing out of there. But that led me to start looking at my new pins to try and figure out what in the world the problem was, because it should not be that hard to get that in there. So I started comparing the old pin to the new pin. The first thing I noticed is this is the pin out of the opposite side. It is actually also bent, so I need to replace that pin as well. And I took my calipers to the two and measured them, and they both measure out for diameter about where they should be, and these are supposed to be 5/16 pins. But what I did notice is it looks like these new pins are not very aggressively chamfered at all at the ends. And I think when I was looking at some of the other ones, it looked like maybe only even one end was. Like that end, you can see there's a reasonable taper right there. And that end, maybe a little bit. But what I'm going to do is chuck these in the drill with some sandpaper and put a much bigger round over on there and see if that helps them go in. Okay, so I got a nice chunk of 60 grit here. I want to make sure that I rotate the pin opposite of this seam, because that seam will come around and just shred the sandpaper. So I want to go the other way. And I think you can see what I'm saying. Going the other way, so I'm against that seam. I'll just see if I can put a little bit of a more round over on it. Of course, these are stainless pins, so. And that's what I've ended up with. Looks like I gave it a pretty good lead in. Let's go get another new pin and kind of hold them side by side and see how they compare. So this is the guy we just sanded on, and this is a brand new one. Looks like I may have done it some good. Yeah, maybe. So let's try our sanded guy, but first it's going to be a fun time trying to get the one out of the rock shaft that I already pounded in there with the air hammer. Probably just going to have to get on that with some vice grips and hope for the best. Actually, I think I'm going to get lucky. So it looks like with the throttle all the way to, or the motion all the way to reverse, this lever will swing over far enough to let me get my straight punch in from the top, just like so. So hopefully I can just drive it back out. It drove in plenty hard, so we'll see what happens. To my surprise, that actually worked. See if I can show you a little better picture of what's going on now. You can see I was just driving the center of that pin in, and the other end of it is starting to poke out because it was jammed up in the hole so hard. So that certainly wasn't doing it. So now I'm going to take my sanded down pin, throw a little bit of anti-seize on it, and try it again. I don't think I'm going to be able to install it from the top though. I could just barely get a hammer swing on it, so we'll try it again from the bottom. And it ended up not being too big of a problem after I sanded the ends of it down. In fact, that pin is a little bit too proud on this side. It's completely flush on the bottom, So I may go back with my punch and just kind of try and drop that pin down so it's a little more centered up, but that'll work. Another thing that helped quite a bit is I did go ahead and just jack up the front of the tractor to give me a little more room to swing a hammer under it. So I think I'm going to touch up that pin, and then our last thing to do is to put our deck height stop thingamabob back on and hope that I didn't get the orientation of this rock shaft wrong. So I've got him a little more centered up in the hole now. There's probably about an equal amount of stick out on both sides. And I should have probably mentioned that when I went to reassemble that guy from the bottom, it had started to do the thing where it was driving the center up through the pin again. So I had to change off to just a regular old big drift punch. And this is just a punch from a cheap Harbor Freight set. Worked nice. So I've got all the pins back in it now, and this is another new one. I did round the top of it over just like I did on the other ones, just with the sandpaper. But I just wanted to show you what I was talking about with this shaft having been repaired before. Right there, you can see the leftmost arm is coming up and hitting the frame. The right arm, when it's in that position, it'll probably be a little hard to show, is probably about an 1/8 to 1/4 inch shy of also hitting the frame. So those two holes that hold those arms on aren't in plane anymore, but that amount of misleveling I should be able to just correct with the deck hangers itself, so shouldn't be a big deal. And there we go, all done. Everything's all pinned back on the way it's supposed to be, and I think she's going to work out a lot better for us. There's just one more thing I want to talk about, and that's that height adjustment guy right there. Pretty much throughout all time, no matter if we're talking about my 14.9 here or my 1650, I've always had a problem with this knob getting loose. You just put the knob through the hole and tighten it to the frame, and that's what torques the whole thing down. So about 2 years ago, I decided to try out a Nord lock washer. I don't know if you guys have seen these or not, but what these are is they're in two halves, and they have teeth on them that actually lock into each other, and then they have teeth on the outside that also dig into whatever you're trying to lock. When you get these, they'll be glued together as a set. But the idea is you just put them in, tighten your thing down, and then these teeth make it impossible for anything to back off. And these things actually work really nicely. So I'll throw a link in the description for you for those. And also, I don't think I mentioned it before, these shear pins I'm using are 5/16 by 1.5 inch stainless. And I did go ahead and take the sandpaper and drill and put a nice round over on both ends of both of these, just so I don't have to remember to do that next time we need one. So that's going to be the end of this one. For now, I'm just going to leave the tunnel cover off because we've still got that transmission oil leak to fix, and I've got parts on the way for that. So, as always, guys, I want to thank you for stopping in, and we'll catch you on the next one. I'm Max, that's Saddington Bear, and we make videos like this all the time. Here are a couple links to some other videos we've made, and we really appreciate you guys stopping in.